Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're taking a deep dive into the U.S. Senate.
Ooh, the Senate.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a big one.
It is. It is.
Lots to cover there.
Yeah, so much power.
So much power.
All those laws, the ones that shape our lives.
Right, right.
And of course, all based on the U.S. Senate structure and function. So that's what we're going to be looking at.
Absolutely. Trying to make sense of it all for everyone.
Exactly.
Break it down.
So the Senate is like this key part of Congress,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's vital.
But it doesn't work alone.
No, it's not a solo act.
Not at all.
It's part of what we call a bicameral system.
Bicameral, now there's a word you don't hear every day.
Fancy.
Yeah.
Right? But it just means two houses of Congress.
Okay, got it.
You've got the Senate and the House of Representatives.
Okay, so it's like they're both working together.
Working together, but also keeping each other in check.
Checks and balances.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
So no one state or group can just take over.
Right. It's all about balance.
Balance, I like it.
And here's where it gets really interesting, at least to me.
Okay, lay it on me.
Each state, no matter how big or small, gets 2 senators.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
2 senators each.
2 senators each.
So that means like massive California with all those people
millions and millions.
gets the same as like Wyoming.
That's right. Same as Wyoming.
I mean, Wyoming's beautiful, don't get me wrong.
Gorgeous state.
But it's like, what, the size of a small city compared to California?
Population-wise. Absolutely.
How does that even work?
Well, it's a compromise. And one that goes way back
Way back.
to the Constitutional Convention.
Oh, wow. So like the very beginning?
The Founding Fathers, they had to figure this out.
I bet that was some debate.
Oh, you can imagine.
Yeah,
Big states, small states, all worried about their power.
makes sense.
So they landed on this system. 2 senators per state.
To make sure everyone felt heard.
Exactly, to protect the smaller states.
So they wouldn't get like steamrolled by the bigger ones.
Exactly.
Interesting. So it's still with us today.
Yep. Shaping how our laws get made
Still working things out.
all these years later.
Wow.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah.
About fairness, representation, all that.
For sure. And it's all still debated today.
Oh, absolutely. Big questions.
But for now, let's maybe switch gears a bit.
Sure. What are you thinking?
Let's talk about what it takes to be a senator.
You want to be a senator.
Well, I know there were some rules.
There are.
Like, you gotta be at least 30 years old.
30 years old. Yep.
A U.S. citizen for at least 9 years.
9 years. Got to know the system.
And you have to live in the state you want to represent.
You got to be connected to the people.
Which makes sense, right?
Right. You'd want your senator to get you.
Get you and your issues.
Right. Like, understand what matters in your state.
Yeah, exactly. Not just some outsider coming in.
Exactly. Someone who's rooted in the community.
Here's what blows my mind.
What's that?
The Senate does way more than make laws.
Oh, way more. You're right.
They have this incredible power, I mean, like, to shape the whole country.
They do. They really do.
Like, think about Supreme Court justices.
Oh, yeah. That's the Senate's job.
Confirming all those appointments.
They get to say yes or no.
And treaties with other countries.
Huge impact on foreign policy.
And even, like, impeachment trials.
That's right. For federal officials.
That's a lot.
Huge responsibility.
I mean, remember those Robert Burke hearings back in '87?
Oh, yeah. That was a showdown.
Talk about political
The
drama.
Senate really flexed its muscles there.
Yeah, rejecting a Supreme Court nominee.
It shows you how much influence they have.
Right. They're not just a rubber stamp.
No, not at all.
They're a separate branch of government, their own thing.
Exactly. With their own responsibilities.
To keep things balanced.
Absolutely. A crucial check on the president's power.
Okay, so we've got the Senate's power.
Big power.
But let's get back to their main gig, lawmaking.
Right. Back to the basics.
It all starts with those bills we always hear about.
Yep. Bills, bills, bills.
And senators, they introduce them, debate them,
Lots of debate.
and then they vote on them.
The final say.
But it's not just like a simple yes or no, right?
Oh, no, it's way more complicated than that.
So much goes into it.
That's a process, a
Yeah.
long process.
With negotiations,
Like a back and forth.
compromises.
Got to find common ground.
So it's really about making sure
About getting it right.
that the laws are good for the whole country.
Exactly. Laws that benefit everyone.
Wow, I'm starting to get why understanding the Senate is so important.
It's the heart of how our country works.
But there's one part I'm still a little fuzzy on.
Okay, what's that?
Those committees, you mentioned them earlier.
Ah, yes, the committees.
What's their role in all of this?
Think of them like expert groups,
Okay.
specialized senators focusing on specific issues.
So like healthcare,
Yep. Healthcare,
education,
education, that's a big one.
national security.
National security, absolutely.
And they really dig deep into these proposed bills
They hold hearings, gather information.
before the full Senate even votes on it
It's like a quality control step.
to make sure the bill's been thoroughly examined.
Exactly, by people who really know their stuff.
Okay, so an example, like, what about the Judiciary Committee?
Oh yeah, they're the ones who look at judicial nominees.
Including for the Supreme Court, right?
The big ones, they hold those intense confirmation hearings,
Oh, yeah, those can get pretty intense.
grilling those nominees about everything,
Qualifications, experience.
their whole judicial philosophy.
Wow, so it sounds like committees are a pretty big deal.
Huge. They shape the laws that affect all of us.
So it's not just about passing laws quickly,
No, it's about getting them right.
taking the time, doing it carefully.
It's about thoughtful, deliberate policymaking.
Fascinating stuff, really starting to get a sense of how the Senate works.
It's a complex machine, that's for sure.
But there's one thing that still bugs me.
What's that?
It's this whole back and forth between the Senate and the House.
Oh, you mean when it comes to passing laws?
Yeah, what's that all about?
Well, it's crucial to understand how a bill actually becomes law.
Okay, take me through it.
It's not enough for just one chamber of Congress to approve it.
Okay,
Both the Senate and the House have to agree.
on the exact same version.
And the exact same version, that's important.
So it's like a double check
You got it.
to make sure everyone's on board.
And that often involves a lot of negotiation.
Compromise, right?
Compromise, exactly.
Because sometimes they pass different versions.
It happens all the time.
And then what?
They form a conference committee.
What's that?
It's like a special team
Okay,
from both the Senate and the House
to sort things out
to hammer out the differences.
and find a version everyone can agree on.
That's the goal.
Wow, so even when they disagree,
And they do disagree a lot.
they still have to work together.
In the end, they have to find a solution.
That works for the whole country.
That's the beauty of our system.
It's designed for debate, for deliberation.
And ultimately, for finding solutions that benefit everyone.
Okay, we've covered a lot about the Senate.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
So many moving parts.
From its structure and these unique powers
Powerful institution.
to this whole process of lawmaking.
The heart of what they do.
But I have to ask about this equal representation idea.
Yeah.
Every state gets 2 senators, no matter their size.
It's a cornerstone of the Senate structure.
But how does that actually affect things today?
How does it play out in the real world of politics?
Right, in those national policy debates.
That's a great question. And to answer it,
Yeah,
we need to dive into some specific examples
that's exactly what we're going to do.
in part 2 of our deep dive.
So stay tuned.
Can't wait.
We'll be right back. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how each state gets those 2 senators.
Right. Equal representation.
No matter how many people actually live there.
Big or small, 2 senators.
And it seems like that could give a ton of power to the smaller states.
It's a point of contention for sure.
Especially when you think about, passing big laws.
Absolutely.
Or deciding who gets to be on the Supreme Court.
Major decisions.
Yeah, huge impact on the whole country.
So let's take climate change policy as an example.
Okay, climate change, big issue these days.
A state like Wyoming,
Wyoming, beautiful place.
big part of their economy is tied to fossil fuels.
Oil, gas, that sort of thing.
Right. And they might have different priorities,
Then a state like California.
which is pushing hard for renewable energy.
Solar, wind power.
Exactly.
So you're saying that 2 senators from Wyoming
Representing a much smaller population.
could actually block climate legislation,
They could if they felt it went against their state's interests.
even if most Americans actually want it.
That's the potential impact of this system.
It's like the needs of a few outweighing the wants of the many.
It's a concern that comes up a lot.
And this isn't just like a theoretical thing.
Oh no, this plays out in real policy debates all the time.
So give me another example, something concrete.
Okay, how about healthcare?
Healthcare, always a hot topic,
Imagine a senator from a rural state.
where people have to drive for hours to see a doctor.
Exactly.
That's a real issue
And that senator might have very different ideas about healthcare reform.
compared to a senator from, say, New York City.
With all those hospitals and specialists,
So their votes on healthcare bills
shaped by the needs of their states.
could have ripple effects across the entire country.
It's a chain reaction.
Wow, so this Senate structure
Equal representation for every state
means those unique state needs,
often end up shaping national policy.
even if it clashes with what most Americans want.
It's a constant balancing act.
Okay, I get the challenges, but are there any benefits to this system?
Well, those who defend it say it's crucial for protecting those smaller states.
Right, so they don't get drowned out.
Exactly, without equal representation.
Yeah.
They argue the bigger states would just dominate,
Call the shots.
and the smaller states would always be outvoted.
So it's about making sure everyone has a seat at the table.
Every state, regardless of size,
Hmm.
gets a voice.
Okay, I can see that side of the argument.
It's about fairness, about balance,
But isn't there a risk that those smaller states could hold back progress?
on issues that affect the whole country.
Yeah, like if most of the country wants something,
But a handful of smaller states don't.
could they block it?
It's possible, and that's the tension.
The debate that's been going on for ages.
Since the very beginning,
Critics say it can lead to gridlock,
making it harder to pass laws even if they have broad support.
even if it's what most people want.
It's a real dilemma
So how do they even function?
with all these competing interests.
Yeah, how do they actually get things done?
Well, remember those committees we talked about?
Yeah, the groups of senators who are experts on certain issues.
That's where a lot of the real work happens,
Okay, but how do those committees work?
with equal representation.
Yeah, is it just chaos?
Not exactly.
Okay, so tell me more about how they operate.
Well, committee assignments are usually proportional to the party makeup of the Senate.
So if one party has a majority,
They'll usually have more members on each committee.
okay, that makes sense.
But that doesn't mean the minority party is powerless,
Oh,
even with fewer members.
they can still make an impact.
Absolutely. They can propose amendments, raise concerns.
So it's not just about numbers.
It's about strategy, about using your voice effectively.
So even in a system with equal representation,
Individual senators can still make a big difference.
okay, so we've talked committees,
Workhorses of the Senate
but what about when all 100 senators come together?
for those big debates.
What's that like?
Oh, that's when things can get really interesting.
I bet.
Imagine 100 incredibly smart and ambitious people,
All in one room,
each with their own agendas,
representing their states.
trying to find common ground on these complex issues.
Sounds intense.
It's a recipe for drama, that's for sure.
Must feel like a giant chess game with all those moves and counter moves.
There's definitely a lot of strategizing that goes on.
Trying to outmaneuver each other.
But it's also a crucial part of our democracy.
How so?
It's about transparency, about having those different viewpoints out in the open.
So the public can see what's going on.
Exactly. The Senate floor is where those ideas get debated, where decisions get made.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a reminder that the Senate isn't some secretive club,
They're accountable to the people.
and that accountability is reinforced in a few ways.
Like how?
Well, first and foremost, we have elections.
Right, every 6 years.
Senators have to face the voters.
And convince them they deserve another term.
So the ultimate power rests with the people.
The power of the vote.
And don't forget about the media,
They're watching everything.
reporting on every move, holding senators accountable.
Shining a light on any shady business.
And then there's public pressure.
people speaking of...
Protests, petitions, calling their senators' offices,
So it's a combination of all these things
elections, media scrutiny, public pressure,
that keeps those senators in check.
and ensures they're actually representing the people who elected them.
Okay, I'm starting to get a much clearer picture of how the Senate works.
It's complex, but it's also fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've covered so much ground.
From equal representation to those high-stakes debates.
But there's still more to explore.
Oh yeah, to really grasp the significance of the Senate.
We needed to take a look
Back in time,
at its history.
at those pivotal moments that shaped America.
So in our final segment,
We'll delve into the past,
and explore some of the biggest challenges facing the Senate today.
the challenges that will shape its future.
Stay with us. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our Senate deep dive, and I'm ready for some Senate history.
You want those big moments.
Yeah, the ones that shaped America. Give me some drama.
Well, when you talk about the Senate's impact, you got to mention treaties,
Treaties with other countries.
huge deals, and the Senate gets to ratify them, say yes or no.
Powerful stuff.
And one of the most dramatic examples is the Treaty of Versailles.
Oh, wow. After World War I, that's a big one.
President Woodrow Wilson, he poured his heart into that treaty,
He wanted to create lasting peace.
but it faced some serious opposition in the Senate.
Really? Why?
Senators like Henry Cabot Lodge, they were worried about the U.S. getting dragged into more conflict.
So they didn't want to sign the treaty.
They argued it could limit America's freedom to act in its own best interest.
Interesting. So what happened?
The Senate used its power and rejected the treaty,
Wow, a major turning point.
a huge moment in U.S. history.
And it shaped how America dealt with the world for years to come.
Absolutely. It shows you how consequential those treaty votes can be.
They can change the course of history.
And this power is still relevant today.
So the Senate is still debating and voting on treaties that affect everything.
From trade to climate change, even military alliances.
Mind-boggling, the decisions made in that chamber can impact the whole world.
It's a big responsibility.
Are there any other big historical moments that come to mind?
Oh, definitely those Supreme Court confirmations.
Those always seem to be big news.
High stakes, political drama, the whole country watching.
Because we're talking about lifetime appointments to the highest court.
And their decisions can affect American law and society for generations.
I remember learning about the Clarence Thomas hearings back in '91.
Oh, yeah,
Things got pretty heated.
they did. Very intense.
Pick all those allegations and discussions about race and gender.
It was a real flashpoint.
The whole country was glued to their TVs.
Waiting to see what the Senate would do.
It felt like the future was hanging in the balance.
And that's the thing. These confirmation hearings can become incredibly contentious.
Because the Senate's role is so crucial.
They have to vet those nominees, really scrutinize them.
Look at their qualifications, their experience.
Their judicial philosophy, everything.
And sometimes, like in the Thomas case, these hearings expose deep divisions in our society.
It can get very raw, very real.
It's a reminder that the Senate is more than just a lawmaking body.
They're the guardians of the Constitution, the protectors of our system of government.
Wow, big shoes to fill.
Absolutely. And their decisions, especially in these high-profile cases, have a lasting impact on America.
So we've talked about structure, powers, history.
The Senate's past, present, and future.
But what about the present? What keeps those senators up at night?
Well, one of the biggest challenges they face is political polarization.
Oh, yeah. That's hard to ignore these days.
It feels like everyone's digging in their heels, refusing to compromise,
No middle ground, just two sides fighting.
and that can really paralyze the Senate, prevent them from getting things done.
But isn't the Senate all about debate and compromise?
Exactly. It's supposed to be a place where different ideas can be heard and solutions can be found.
But with all this polarization,
It's getting harder and harder for senators to work together.
so it's like this vicious cycle
Polarization leads to gridlock. It just makes people more frustrated.
and erodes trust in government.
It's a real problem.
So what can be done? Is there a way to fix this?
Well, a lot of people are talking about reforming the Senate's rules.
To encourage more cooperation.
Exactly. Things like making it easier to bring bills to a vote or limiting filibusters.
Those tactics that can stall things forever.
Right. And some even suggest term limits for senators.
To bring in fresh blood, new perspectives.
It's all about finding ways to break the gridlock
It's a tall order, but it sounds crucial for the future of the Senate.
and for the future of our democracy.
So we've explored the Senate's inner workings, its impact on history, and the challenges it faces today. What's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say the most important thing is to remember that the Senate isn't some abstract entity. It directly affects our lives.
Those 100 senators make decisions that impact all of us.
And the structure of the Senate, especially this idea of equal representation, has a profound effect on how those decisions get made.
It creates opportunities and challenges that are still being debated today.
And ultimately, the Senate's effectiveness depends on those senators.
On their willingness to listen, to compromise, to work for the good of the whole country.
And that's where our listeners come in. As engaged citizens, it's our job to stay informed.
Hold our elected officials accountable.
Make our voices heard through voting, contacting our senators, participating in public discourse.
It's our democracy. We have the power to shape it.
So stay engaged, stay informed, and let's work together to make our government work better for everyone.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the U.S. Senate.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned something new and feel inspired to engage with this vital part of our government.
Because it's your government.
It belongs to all of us.